All right, what is going on, my friends? Mike Walker here with you, Client Services Director at The Wealthy Consultant. And this, of course, is the Wealthy Consultant podcast. I've got a great topic for you today, one that is definitely something that I look at every single day in my role and just in life in general. This is a kind of a passion project, a passion topic, if you will, in my life, just because I know it serves me well and I know it's going to serve you well. So I want to dive right into it with you. The title for today's podcast is Mastering Simplicity and Unveiling Strategies for Elevating Client Experience. I'd say everybody here listening is probably fairly, comfortable and used to the idea that, hey, there's simplicity, the benefits of it, all the different things that you probably already consider in your own life and business. However, I want to bring the context down even a little bit more high res, specifically towards the topic of elevating the client experience. And this is critical because today's environment, as I'm sure you're very aware, just looking at your own social news feed or whatever media you consume these days, it's kind of content overload. There's no shortage of content out there. And that's something that we need to consider too, as business owners, as coaches, consultants, educators, whatever that may be, however you identify yourself in the marketplace and bring value to the market. We need to understand that, look, it's great if we have a lot of information to share. We typically do, especially if we're passionate and an expert in our particular lane or abilities. However, we need to understand where people are coming from when they're listening to or accessing the information that we're providing. And there's a difference and oftentimes a large gap between what it is that we're delivering, both in value and volume, and what people are actually absorbing. So you can be, over delivering, just throwing down extreme value, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's reaching the audience in a way that they can truly assimilate it. And then most importantly, deploy it into their own business or into their own lives. And that's a really important thing to consider when trying to make a difference in the marketplace. We all want to make that impact. We all want to serve our clients well and help raise them up or whatever it is. Again, in whatever field you're in, it's imperative to understand that just because it's high value and really, really good stuff that you're giving them doesn't necessarily mean that it's as easy for them, the client or customer, to then use it, assimilate it, and apply it into their own worlds. And so I want to share with you some ideas for how we can use simplicity to elevate that experience and make sure that we're not confusing, again, the volume for value. All right. So again, the idea here is pretty simple in that people these days are not lacking information. There is no lack of information out there. You've got the Google searches, you've got ChatGPT, you've got, you name it, right? There is no shortage of information out there. What is in high demand and in what is in shortage is context, lacking context. How does this apply to my life or business? And more importantly, how do I actually deploy it, right? And so we always want to be thinking in those terms of, hey, yes, I want to over deliver. I want to give my clients, my customers as much value as I possibly can. But how can I do that in a way that's simple for them to actually do that? And thinking through the client experience in a very methodical and systems thinking way is really the only way to make sure that happens. I want to share with you some ideas on that. One thing, a key note here too, is that simplicity doesn't necessarily mean lack of complexity. And I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong, is to think, well, it's simple, so it's got to be easy or basic. And that's not necessarily true. This is something we deal with all the time, especially with our modern day consultant clients and our top tier clients that we serve here at the company. We're dealing with very complex problems. We're navigating through extremely sophisticated business environments, business functions, deliverability elements. There's so many different facets of the business equation that need to be considered. It's very complex. It is very far from simple, right? However, simplicity can make the complex feel simple and easy to use. Okay, so that's the kind of the difference here, is that we are using and we are still deploying, exceptionally sophisticated technology, services, systems, etc. However, we're making them accessible and feel easy to use. And so a great example, a very basic one, to help kind of wrap that concept up, is just consider, the spaceship, right? Like take the old craft, like take Apollo, right, from the 60s, launch that thing up into the space, get man onto the moon. And the type of technology that was required to make that happen naturally would be very, very sophisticated and very complex. And if you look at the manuals and everything that was required, and the thousands, literally thousands of people that were required to make that type of mission, come to fruition, was exceptional. It was by no other words an exceptional human feat. However, the technology that was used to make that happen is, in today's terms, quite basic. And so just look at, say, the iPhone or the iPad. Now you have something that has just immense amount of, computing ability, memory storage, all the other elements that were non-existent back then. Nowadays, they are literally just in our own hands, right? And so you can have a child, you can give a child an iPad, and they can navigate and find videos, find their games, right? You see it all over the place at every restaurant you go to. You see parents and just, hey kid, here, have an iPad, right? And they can easily and intuitively navigate it. And that's what we're talking about here. It's not that the iPad is basic or simple or lacking complexity, far from it. But what they've done so eloquently is make that complexity very simple to navigate. And that's what we want to look at when we're considering, how do we elevate our client experience? How can we eat that complexity for them so that they can navigate the environment, navigate our education, our curriculum, whatever it may be, in a way that's as intuitive and simple as possible. That's what we're looking for. So again, don't confuse simplicity for a lack of complexity. It's really the reverse of that. It's actually making the complex feel eloquently simple. That's the magic. That's where mastery comes in, right? And so there's a lot of elements here. I've touched on this a little bit too, but I want to make sure that we underline, highlight, redline this one, circle it, whatever you got to do in your mind, because this one comes up a lot when I talk with our clients who are typically, again, consulting other companies or growing other businesses, et cetera. And a lot of them confuse volume with value. In the interest of over delivering, in the interest of wanting to just give their very best to the world and to the marketplace, to their clients, they tend to overdo it and confuse that volume as like, I want to give everything I've got, which is a noble thing. It's an understandable thing to want to do. But the reality is that it's kind of like, for a funny analogy, it's kind of like giving, a filet mignon or some really high quality steak to a baby, right? It's like, this is the best we got. This is the world's best steak. But to give it to a baby is like, they can't assimilate it. This isn't helping them, So it doesn't matter that it's so good or so volumetrically dense in quality or whatnot, if they can't assimilate it, if they can't naturally use it in the environment that they're in. And so it's really important as educators and consultants and coaches that we understand where the market sophistication and the market's awareness levels are with the audience that we're in front of. And sometimes holding back and actually delivering less or delivering a more simplified down version of your training or of your product is sometimes better, at least in the earlier goings. And so that's also something you want to consider as you're looking to, again, improve the client experience and make sure that you're getting the absolute best for your clients, is how can I make this easier and chunk it down? Typically, you're going to look at systems or use ways of dividing up the information into smaller bite-sized pieces, if you will. We do this a lot. In fact, we have a template inside of the Modern Day Consultant program called the Flagship Offer Template. And for brevity here, we won't go through every single detail of that, but essentially it's a very simple way of breaking down a complex business solution, say an end result, an desired need, whatever it is in the marketplace that your ideal client has. And then we reverse engineer that end result into 4 pillars or tiers or phases, if you will, right? Think of like a stepladder approach, and you take one step, complete that step again into the next, third, fourth. And then by the time you've accumulated or accomplished all 4 of those tiers or phases, they then equate to or add up to that end result that you're looking for, right? And so it's a very simple concept, but it's one that's really imperative to understand, again, from the client's perspective. So many times as passionate, excited entrepreneurs that are, typically very skilled in your particular lanes, we don't necessarily always remember that our level of knowledge is not necessarily the same as the client, obviously, right? And so we therefore need to consider, can my client take this information and actually deploy it? How can I make this as accessible and simple to navigate, just like an iPad is, right? You put that person in a rocket ship, yeah, that rocket ship might be able to get them to the moon. But if they're just looking at a dashboard of buttons and levers and screens and don't know how to use what, when, and how, right? It's not going to do them any good. You hand them an iPad and you just push one button, and then with the drag of your finger, you can navigate across multiple different apps and multiple different functions. Well, naturally, that's a better experience, right? That's what we want to do for our business, is how can we make our business, our curriculum, our client experience as easy and intuitive to navigate as an iPad. All right. So what I want to do is I want to leave you with a few questions that I think will help you as you consider this and look at ways of embracing simplicity as a competitive advantage. And that's a key word I want to highlight here is competitive advantage. Again, there is a lot of great information out there. Again, there's no shortage of it. But what is in high demand right now is making the complex simple, making information easy to navigate and then deploy quickly and intuitively. That's where mastery is. That's where you can differentiate yourself in the marketplace by making the complex simple and by turning your solution, your offer, your service, whatever it is that you bring to the marketplace, make that as just amazingly simple and intuitive to navigate as possible. That by far, my friends, will put you ahead of the pack for sure. Okay, because as things become more and more complicated with AI and all the new tools and SaaS and all these new things that people are constantly being bombarded with, especially in the economic and marketplaces and business space, if you can make things feel simple and feel intuitive and like, wow, that was easy, awesome, and you can get them a great quality result at the same time, by default, you are winning for sure. All right. So here are just 3 questions I want you to consider. Hopefully, if you're listening, you can write these down. If not, revisit this when you can. But these are 3 key questions that I believe will help you distill these concepts down into your own business and deploy them immediately into your offering, service, etc. Question number 1 is, can you identify the most complex aspect of your current client interaction or business process? So here's where you want to kind of take a zoomed out approach to the client experience from start to finish and just start picking it apart. Start at the beginning and sequentially go through every single step or interaction. That's an email that's sent, a text that's sent, your website, any forms that they fill out, contracts that need to be signed, right? Like every single step, map that out. That can be a little, depending on the complexity of your business environment, that might take some time to do. But I'd highly encourage you do it, because if it's hard for you to even write it out, you can imagine what it's like for a client who's just never been in that environment before to try to navigate it on their own, right? It can be very daunting. So you really want to write this thing out, map it out, the client journey and every step that's required, every click of a button, every entry of a form. Consider it from the client's perspective. Is there a way that we can eat this complexity for them? Is there a way that we could eliminate this step, entirely, right? Like really look for a way to strip things down, make them as simple as possible. Again, knowing that there's no doubt probably some very complex or important information that needs to get taken care of. So you need to consider that as well. But again, think of all the possible ways that you could eat that complexity for the client and eliminate any potential bottlenecks that are happening in that client experience, especially up front where it's so critical to make that first impression. Question number 2, how aligned are your teams, internal teams, in understanding the importance of simplicity and a seamless client experience? This is a key one, guys, because where I see a lot of inside of a lot of businesses, you kind of have these siloed departments. You have, the marketing team, and then you have a sales team, and then you have a client success team, right? And they're all kind of developed and working in their own way, in their own, little ecosystems, which in some aspects is required, of course. But there really needs to be an overarching understanding and appreciation for the need of simplicity throughout the entire experience. You need your marketing team to understand that what a client first sees out in the marketplace, that is the beginning of the client experience. Okay. The client experience doesn't start once they've signed the dotted line and sent in some money. That's not where the client experience starts. The client experience actually starts at the very first touch that they ever have with your brand. So marketing needs to be thinking in terms of this simplicity factor as well, just like the sales team needs to consider, okay, look, we have this sales process. There's multiple touches, maybe there's multiple communications or steps that are required to vet this person, et cetera, right? You need to think through those terms and go, well, how can we make this experience, this education, experience for the client to vet whether or not we're in alignment, this is a good fit for them. How do we make that as simple as possible, right? And then thirdly, taking that all the way over into the client experience side, once they do actually become a client, how do we make that transition as simple as possible? One of the things I've seen a lot is where you have these sales teams that spend an amazing amount of time, as needed, of course, to cultivate the relationship and the trust factor required to turn essentially a cold market participant into a excited paying customer, right? Like that, there takes a lot of touch points typically and a lot of effort. And yet, as soon as that happens and that person now becomes a customer or client, they just kind of get handed off to client services. Okay, here you go. Joe's ready to start now. And that client has no exposure to whoever they just got handed off to. And so we really need to think of, in the interest of elevating the client experience, we need to consider, how can we make these three aspects of my business, marketing, sales, and then client experience, how do we make these seamless for the client, right? Sure, internally there's going to be silos, there's going to be departments, different people, et cetera. But to the client's perspective, it should feel seamless. It should be intuitively easy to navigate through that experience. The more you can do so, the better. And that's where you can actually turn some of these topics we're talking about in terms of simplicity and ease of navigation and whatever it may be, right? You can actually turn these into marketing points, sales points. You can actually bring this simplicity and this philosophy of simplicity into your language in marketing and sales, so that there's this cohesive common thread that's woven through these different aspects of your business, these different areas of the client experience. They have this underlying, common theme across all of them, which is, hey, we're making the complex simple. Right now, whether that's verbatim what you say or some variation thereof, obviously that's up to you. But I think you get my point. How aligned are your internal teams in understanding the importance of simplicity from the very first touch that a client might or a prospect may have with your brand, all the way through to the point where they are a raving fan and seeing the results in your product or service that you've promised, right? All right, that's question number 2. Lastly, question number 3 here. Can you think of examples from other industries or companies where a focus on simplicity transformed the experience from your perspective? So this is a great one to do. Again, we kind of already touched on this as an example, which is why I provided it earlier, which is the iPhone or the iPad, right? Consider the amazing amount of complexity that's required, and that's literally embedded within that device, right? It's exceptional. It's by multitudes higher complexity than the equipment that was used to get man to the moon. So how is it possible that a 4-year-old can use that device to easily navigate to games or videos that they want to see, right? It's the user experience. It's the fact that Apple has eaten that complexity for the customer and made it very intuitive to navigate, right? Well, there's other industries. This is a little tip for you guys. One of the best ways to stay competitive and kind of be on the leading edge of your industry and in your niche is to look outside your industry and consider other industries, products, services that are completely outside of your realm, right? Completely not even close to the same world that you exist in. And look and study those businesses, study those business models, study those systems, and actually adapt them into yours. It's a really great way to kind of, crowdsource essentially what would be cutting edge ideas for your industry, but to others, they would be commonplace and well proven, right? So that's a really cool way to consider, is go to the mall, go online, call companies, like whatever you got to do, go visit other people's websites. Just start looking around, opening your eyes to how are some of the best companies in the world eating complexity and making the customer experience as simple and intuitive as possible. If you can adapt some of those ideas and deploy them into your own business, again, you'll be light years ahead of your competition. All right. Excellent, guys. This was a big one, but hopefully the topic of, simplicity, mastering simplicity, and elevating the client experience resonates with you, ultimately, at the end of the day, our clients are the decision makers, right? They are the ones that dictate our success in the marketplace. And so therefore, by default, if we can help them become more successful, if we can help them get their desired results, then naturally we're going to succeed as well as a company, as an entity. And so I want to just encourage you to always put the perspective on, how does the client experience feel? How does this impact them? And how do they deploy these my services or products for themselves? And if you can constantly revisit that, I'm very, very confident that you will continue to evolve and become an absolute dominant leader in your own respective industry and service category. All right. Excellent, guys. Love talking with you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Would love a follow. Would love any comments that you have. Drop them near or around wherever you're listening or watching this. And we love you guys. And we'll see you on the next episode of TWC Talks. All right. Take care, guys. See ya.